Here's a question. What do you think a revolution is? I have never in my life, well, since I was about 13 years old and began to study these matters, from then on, I have never valued the Second Amendment. Never. I've never valued the Constitution. To me, the Declaration of Independence is the highest distillation of politics in human history. And the Constitution was a counter-revolutionary act. You know, you could start with basic principles and ask the question, which is always answered in terms of the social contract. Where did these people get the authority to sign my life to this document 200 years in advance of my birth? They didn't have any such authority. Lysander Spooner was exactly right. When it comes to the Second Amendment, I started saying 25 years ago in Usenet that if it needed to be written down, then it can be erased. That's what they're doing. Think of it in more basic philosophical terms. Do you think your rights come from the Second Amendment? Do you think your rights come from somebody, no matter how revered they are in American history? Do you think your rights come from somebody sitting down and saying, wait a minute, write this down? That guy's rights come from this piece of paper. Is that what you think? Take a good long look around. Did you notice what Joe Biden said recently? What was it, the other day? It was widely reported, but you can see it right here at the New York Post, for instance. The story is dated April 8th, which is yesterday. He said, no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Think that through. Now, look, the man's a moron, all right? He didn't have much of a mind to lose before he got started on the presidential project, all right? But when he hauls off and says something like that, I take him at his word of intent, whether he's sane or not. Because the fact of it is that everything is exactly that fluid to him and the people driving him. It always has been. Now, let's take that again. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. I wonder if we should take that up in terms of the 13th Amendment. Is anybody here familiar with the 13th Amendment? Right. That's the one that prohibits slavery. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. What about the 13th slavery? What's not absolute about that? Again, as if the rights of black people to be free come from the Constitution. They don't. They come from people's individual nature. That's what we are. It's the way we're built. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm also an atheist, and I don't require God to make this argument. That's a whole different philosophical angle. It's the assertion of the religious believers that religion is necessary to morality. I maintain it's not, but I don't have any grief with that. I can scrape right past that. For instance, when I read John Locke, and every time I come across the word God, I substitute reality and carry right on. So, no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. If you take that at its word for word, and as Hitchens said, always look to the language, well, why don't we get to question something like the 13th Amendment on those grounds? Maybe we should, just to make it clear to some of these people what they have at stake. How about the 16th Amendment requiring the income tax? Is there anything absolute about that? Let's go through them all. Now, he makes reference to you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater bromide. Nobody does that anyway. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, someone should draw the analogy to me to owning a firearm, which is what this is all about, and hollering fire in a crowded theater. Now, this is an enormous smear that's going on, and what that means is it's about attributing the guilt of some people to the innocent in this case. Some idiot runs out and starts shooting up the place with a rifle or any kind of firearm, and this is their response. Now, prima facie, on its face, it makes no damn sense. I don't think they're interested in making sense. This is a cover for people who buy this sort of crap. It usually sells to people who don't try not to think it through. And we've reached a point in American philosophy where nothing is absolute. Now, whether or not this was the point and object of pragmatism about 125 years ago, this is the necessary consequence of it all. You go study it. I thought Ayn Rand did a very good job of illuminating this in her introduction to objectivist epistemology, where she points out how the beginning point, the most fundamental point of pragmatism is that there is no reality beyond what we make up in our minds, and that therefore everything is simply a social convention. It has serious ethical and political implications, and America's been living it for, like I said, 125 years or more. So when we get to something like this, there's enormous academic and professional philosophical background for somebody like an idiot like Biden to say something like this. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Now, he's running a regime in which they don't even have to be, because he can accomplish all kinds of things with executive orders. Now, it's not just him. It's simply that the crisis of executive orders have come to a head during his regime here now. This, too, is, again, a consequence of the fact that Trump scared the hell out of these people, and once they were able to steal the election and slide him back in, they now know everything that they have to do as fast as they can while they have the opportunity, and this is part of it. There is tremendous power in the executive, and he can go ahead and write these orders and begin to implement them in the administrative layer of the government, and it will take unchristly litigation to turn any of this over, even if you can reason with the courts. I would point out another cultural problem there. Many judges have been reared on the same ideology. And if you want to talk about what's reasonable, what we're really talking about is what would be reasonable to any individual human being, except for the fact that as you make your way up the courts in litigation in America, reason stops at the United States Supreme Court. They issue their ruling, and that's that. The most general point of all this goes like this. It's that revolutions can happen while most people don't even know that that's what's happening. I think most people conceive, when they think about it at all, they conceive revolutions as temporal events with a time-scaled character. They're sudden and tumultuous, but it's not necessarily so. I want to show you something. This comes from Alan Bullock's terrific 1965 study, Hitler, A Study in Tyranny, right? He wrote this, and he's writing about, I'm going to show you, he's writing about the period immediately after Hitler gained the chancellery in 1933. Bullock writes, "Rarely has disillusionment been so complete or so swift to follow. Those who, like Papin, believed that they had seen through Hitler were to find that they had badly underestimated both the leader and the movement. For Hitler's originality lay in his realization that the effective revolutions in modern conditions are carried out with and not against the power of the state. The correct order of events was to first secure access to that power and then begin his revolution. Hitler never abandoned the cloak of legality. He recognized the enormous psychological value of having the law on his side. Instead, he turned the law inside out and made illegality legal." Well, if you think about it, that's what's happening all through America today. Now, this is a culmination of both general philosophy and culture and politics. It's not going to happen in America the way it did in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 or Hitler's Germany in 1933. And this is a great deal to do with the political structures in America. The United States Constitution is unique in this way, and that calls for a different revolutionary approach. Now, this is going to attract all the worst people. F.A. Hayek pointed it out. And you could turn to just about any chapter in this book and find citations to this. But he does an entire chapter entitled Why the Worst Get on Top. This was written in 1949, I believe, without looking it up. I'm sorry, 44. This is 1944. War wasn't even over yet. At one point in chapter 10, Why the Worst Get on Top, he's pointing out exactly why the worst get on top, and he lists negative principles of selection. This is what I call them. And you could, like, again, you could cite from any of this, but here's just one at random for you to think about. Here comes in the second negative principle of selection. The ruler, he, will be able to obtain the support of all the docile and gullible who have no strong convictions of their own, but are prepared to accept a ready-made system of values, if only it is drummed into their consciousness, into their ears sufficiently and loudly and frequently. How many people do you know like that? How many people do you know who will go out and sign up for government jobs like medicine these days? As you notice that that medicine generally acts like the police, you might not be old enough to remember a time when they didn't. I know otherwise respectable people who want to become jail guards and things like that. They ought to read Roger Martin. You know what? I didn't know. You can't get this book anymore. It's terribly expensive. This is a guy who was an airline pilot, got laid off his jobs back in the 80s and took a job at the Orange County Jail, and it just about destroyed his soul. They don't know what they're getting into because they don't have that system of values on their own, and all they're listening to is the propaganda of the day. Joe Biden and the people driving him are running an administrative revolution. That's where they're working from the inside. We know the FBI is corrupt as hell, and let's not even talk about the rest of the so-called intelligence community. God only knows what those idiots are doing behind the scenes. I mean, we get peeks of it now and then, but nobody's gone to jail, and everybody should have, certainly at the top. There's plenty of room in the administrative layer of the government for these people to work, and that's what they're doing. Now, I don't know what anybody's going to do about this. What are you going to do? You think you're going to go to court? Good luck. All right. Just the way litigation works in this country, it becomes narrowly focused on appeal. And you don't get to deal with general principles, really. To the whole look of it to the contrary. If you actually read court opinions, they're very narrowly focused, and the court themselves, certainly the Supreme Court, all the courts themselves now are beginning to abdicate their responsibility for rational judgment and analysis. Okay, they're beginning to they have been for a long time, make the most politically acceptable and expedient rulings that they can. So there's not going to be any help there in tearing all this down. As Thoreau points out in Civil Disobedience, why should anybody go appeal to the courts? Life is short. Okay, and it's nobody's job to fix the whole culture. And while all of that's going on, the destruction of morality, ethics, and politics in this country at the hands of something like this will continue completely unabated, while some little case that somebody presumes to be important is noodling its way through the courts. No, they're going to keep doing what they do. There will be no legislative blocks, certainly not in the next 2 years. What do you think? You're going to vote harder? Everybody's going to vote harder and vote their way out of this? Good luck. I contend that voting is how we got here. Nobody with a brain in their head subjects their rights or anyone else's to the opinion of a mob, and that's what's been happening, and that's how we got here. So I don't know what anyone's going to do about any of this, but you ought to know what's coming. You definitely ought to know what's coming. They're coming hard and fast now. And there is no end to it. It's all going to keep getting worse because they keep making it worse. And as they keep making it worse, they're going to keep trying to make it better their way. Which only ever makes it worse and worse.